Hi, and welcome to the Breakthrough Emotional Eating podcast. My name is Kristen Jones, and thank you again, as I say every week. Thank you so much for joining me this week. Y'all don't usually see me have somebody else on with me. You usually just have to listen to me talk all the time, but I am so excited, as I always am excited when I have a guest. I have a very, very special guest here. And Kayla, I hope I do not butcher your name because it's like the two-parter. I usually can get it, but sometimes I think I mess it up. So Kayla Simbriski-Peltier? Peltier?
Simbriski-Peltier.
Peltier. Oh, see, a CH where there's a T.
Yeah.
Would never get that. Never in a million years. So awesome. Thank you. That's beautiful. Kayla is from Ontario, Canada, and she is a specialist in addressing emotional trauma and how that can relate to just all aspects of your life. It's not just limited to emotional eating, but for today's purposes, she's going to tell us a little bit about what she does, and then a little bit about how it relates to emotional eating. And again, as we know, as I talk about it all the time, our lives are not compartmentalized. It's not like, okay, I have a problem here and it doesn't go anyplace else. It just stays right here. We know that everything in our lives, especially in our emotional lives, it's everywhere. It's everywhere in our lives. And so we can't just address one thing and think it's totally isolated. We have things that just infiltrate every aspect of our lives, and we have to deal with everything if we're going to really, truly address things. So like I said, I'm super excited that Kayla is here with us. So Kayla, welcome. Thank you. Welcome to the podcast. Super happy you're here. And so can you tell us a little bit about, tell the listeners and the viewers a little bit about your business and kind of what you do?
Right. So first of all, I'm happy to be here. Thanks again, Kristen.
Absolutely. Love having you.
So I started my business just a little over a year ago. The first thing I started with was as a yoga instructor, started in that route. And then I got a fitness and nutrition certificate and started helping people with weight loss. And I found that I really enjoyed helping people take a holistic approach to getting their health on track and losing weight, helping people get their eating habits and fitness on track in an effective and a safe way, those sort of things, right? And through yoga, I really help, I enjoy helping people get in touch with their bodies, learning how to become more self-aware, becoming more self-compassionate, and then also learning how to improve and increase their flexibility safely, because that's super important too. We often forget about that aspect. And what I often really try to, well, not preach, but I'll say a lot is, I don't have a problem with products. Products are great, but I always believe that products should complement an already developed healthy lifestyle rather than compensate for an unhealthy one. So that's a really big thing that I kind of say. And I think that's a real key for long-term results and health. So with all of that, and then with this year, the new thing that we're talking about today, the new aspect I'm incorporating into my business is known as I'm a grief recovery specialist now, which I'm super excited about because this is giving me the opportunity to help my clients on a more emotional and mental health level that can, like you were saying, how everything is connected. And it's true, like our mental health and our emotional health and our physical health is all connected. So this gives me the opportunity to incorporate that into my business now too. So that's the big thing I'm bringing in now.
That is so exciting. That's so cool. And I love when, when anyone finds an area that they're especially passionate about, because to me, that's when you can really be effective in helping people, because people can sense your passion, and they can sense like when you're like really like you're really committed and devoted to what they're doing. And we really have to, and I think for all of us, and everybody in the group knows this as well, it's like we all have to find what we're passionate about, and then really just live that authentically. And I think that's obviously something that you're doing. So that's super cool. That's awesome. So can you tell us a little bit about the grief recovery, what that is, and how that can complement what you're already doing, and how that you're kind of using that to help serve your clients?
Yeah. So like I said, I like helping people get their health in order. But what I found was I was kind of missing this component with what I was doing. So I kind of went through this phase where I started reading a lot of like self-help books and self-development books, to help me, but also to find new ways to help out my clients. And I came across something called the Grief Recovery Handbook by John W. James and Russell Friedman. And they're also the founders of the Grief Recovery Institute, by the way. And when I found this book, I just devoured it. And I realized reading through it, I was like, oh my God, this is my problem. And this is the work I need to do for myself. So through it, I really learned, the importance of recovering from grief, from loss, from trauma, right? To be able to actually fully invest in yourself, especially on a physical level, because those things really, they hold you back like a lot. And I used to really push for the idea before that if you improve your physical health, then your mental and emotional health will follow, which like they are connected. So it's somewhat true. When you start getting your physical health in line, you cut back on sugar and stuff, and you balance your blood sugars and your hormones and all the things, then your mood will start to improve, and you'll see those improvements. But for some people, the emotional health and the mental health really needs to come first so that they can really be able to build those habits consistently. So I became certified as a grief recovery specialist so I can make that a primary part of my services to help the people who are struggling on that level. And it's really giving them a block on being able to really get consistent with the physical improvements that they're trying to make.
Good, good. That's awesome. And I love the fact that you, as you were looking into this to initially help your clients, and all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, this is what I need. And so that's what I think, that's what's really cool, is that we discover, I think we, as we're moving through, we discover what we need, and we know we're not the only ones. And so it's like, okay, if I can do this and I can help myself, then you put yourself in a much better position to be able to help others, because you know it works, because you know you've walked the walk. And that's just that, for that type of, for that credibility, it's really important to be able to do that. That's so cool. I want to ask those of you who are in the group, as we've been talking about this, and as you've been watching and listening, I would love for you, if you feel like there is some sort of grief, or there's some sort of, I'm just going to say an issue, some sort of issue that you feel that you might know what it is, you might not know what it is, but if you feel like there's something, from your past that is like a roadblock that's kind of holding you back, all I want you to do is put, and you don't have to go into any detail, but all I want you to do is put in the comments, just put the word roadblock. Put the word roadblock in the comments if you feel like grief or trauma or just some sort of loss is that roadblock that you feel like is holding you back from taking your next steps forward, whatever that is, whether it's in a job, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's in your health, your eating, whatever it is. So just put the word roadblock in. Oh my goodness, let me see. We got all sorts of roadblocks here. All sorts of roadblocks. Awesome. All right, good. And I think that it's huge. I think the first, and Kayla, I don't want to speak for you, but I think that you can probably agree that the first step is just like recognizing, like, there's something going on that I'm not really sure what it is, but there's something, and just being able to acknowledge that is probably really pretty important.
Yeah, and I would say it actually, when you start to kind of learn a little bit, then you start to kind of figure out what the problem is pretty quickly, at least in my opinion.
Right.
Like, 'cause you know yourself, you do. And when you start to get enough information, you start to go, oh my God, oh, it is that. That's what it
Right.
is. And that's basically how this whole thing went down for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what can you give us a little background on what is grief and how does it relate to emotional eating and getting into better eating habits?
Right. So in the grief recovery handbook, we have two definitions I'm going to bring up. So the first definition is grief is the normal and natural reaction to loss. So loss can be, death of a loved one, it could be divorce, it could be a change of career, it could be a loss of the job, pets, basically something that you really cared about and you lost it, right? So it left your life in some way or another. And then the other definition is grief is the conflicting feelings caused by the end of or change in a familiar pattern of behavior. So I'm going to explain that a little bit. So a good example, a few good examples is, for instance, maybe a grandparent has been suffering from a terminal illness for a few years, maybe as much as 5 to 10 years, and they finally pass. And this causes a lot of conflicting feelings because, we're happy they're no longer suffering, but we still lost somebody we cared about. And then we start to intellectualize, okay, well, I shouldn't feel bad because they're not suffering anymore. But really, that's not true. You lost somebody you cared about. Of course, you feel bad and you need to go through that. You need to acknowledge those feelings. Some other examples can be changing a career. So maybe the new one pays better and that's great, but you loved your colleagues from the last one and you're missing the fact that you're not around them anymore. I've known people who have moved a lot. So moving from one town to another, and the move is great. Maybe you got a bigger house, but you miss a lot of your old friends. So in the grief recovery, we are very firm in stating that every relationship is unique and all grief is personal. There are no comparisons and no exceptions. If it hurts, and you have to feel it out. There's no way around that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
so it's that process of the feeling of actually taking those steps to, it's so interesting, as you were saying, that you can rationalize it in your head that I shouldn't be feeling this way. So then you start to make yourself feel bad for feeling or for not feeling bad or feeling bad. And then there's that conflict as well.
Yeah. And we say, like, it's all about going from here to here when we go through the process, because you need to go through this process. You can't intellectualize your feelings. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
Not that it's a bad thing to think and to make sense of things, but you still do need to go through the emotional process as well.
Oh, that's so good. So can you explain what a STIRBS is? I know there's that's a term that you have mentioned to me before, so I know it's probably pretty relevant for everybody else. So what would STIRBS be?
Yeah, so exactly, that's the next thing. So STIRBs are called short-term, or is short for short-term energy relieving behaviors. So a cliche example of this, which a lot of us can probably relate to in this group, is, say a child comes home crying. Parent says, "What happens?" And then the kid says, "The other kids were mean to me." So then the parent might respond saying, "Oh, honey, these things happen. Don't let it get to you. Here, have a cookie. You'll feel better." So then what happens is the child associates eating with feeling better, but they don't actually resolve the issue. But what happens is, the cookie initiates that response of releasing dopamine, which, we know is a happy hormone, and it distracts them long enough so that they think they feel better. And it seems relatively harmless, but then the problem is what'll happen is this child will start to associate food with happiness. And let's say if something really devastating happens in their life, like they lose a loved one through terminal illness and they die or anything, right? Then they might turn to food to cope with those feelings, which can lead to things like emotional eating, for instance.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I would say that describes probably a lot of people who, if you can relate to what Kayla just talked about, if you feel like that's something that was maybe set up for you a long time ago in your childhood, let's go ahead and put the word cookie. Put the word cookie in the comments if you feel like that pattern might have been something that you had created for you. And unwittingly, your parent wanted you to feel better. That's, nobody wants to put that onto their child, as well as I know, as for people who are parents, you don't want to do that to your kids, but you just want your child happy. You just don't want your child in pain. Nobody wants to see that. So we all do the best we can with the information that we're given. So I'm sure that there are other STIRBs besides eating. So, and I'm sure they probably go along with kind of what I've talked about as well. So please share what the other STIRBs things are that people can do as opposed to food.
So yeah, like STIRBs, short-term energy relieving behaviors, they can really be anything.
Mhm.
So using myself as an example, you know, I turned to things like drugs and alcohol for a while.
Mhm.
Um, Things like, you know, you can indulge in your work, you could become a workaholic, right?
Mhm.
Or the
Mhm.
shopaholic, you can over exercise. And sometimes, you know, there stirbs don't always appear to be bad things. Like something like becoming overeducated can actually be a
Yeah.
stirb. Because what
Mhm.
can happen is, and I've seen this in myself and with some of my friends, is you graduate college or something and you don't feel ready to enter the workforce and you don't feel ready to not be a student. And I'm really like, you end up grieving leaving school. So
Mm.
instead of leaving school and moving on to the next thing, you go back to school and enter a new thing and then just accumulate more student debt, which causes a lot of problems.
Right.
So even just constantly seeking education can be a stir for that sort of thing. So it can really be anything. What it really is you're trying to hide your feelings with something else.
Hmm. Yeah. So in life coaching, like one of the term we use is buffer. So it's a buffering technique. And it was funny. I was just talking. I actually have a coach that I listen to. I listen to her podcast, and she talks about how she can get caught up in buffering in like reading books and trying to learn new information. And she just like, I learn, and then I'm not actually implementing, I'm not actually applying it, or I'm not implementing it, or she's not sharing it with her clients. She's just getting so wrapped up in the process of learning because it makes her feel really good. It makes her feel really smart. And like, like she just knows so much. And but yeah, and it can be a way of hiding.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is so interesting. So how can you know if your behavior is disturbing? Because I'm thinking I probably have like three of those listed. Three of the things you
Oh
talked
yeah.
about.
Yeah, it's yeah, there's so many things that it could be, but really it's tricky because the thing with disturbed is they appear to work, right? They think they're working, but really they're only working for the short term, hence
Mhm.
short term energy relieving behaviors. So what would be the best thing to do is if you find yourself looking for something to make you feel better immediately
Mhm.
or doing something for immediate gratification, then you could be disturbing, for instance. So what might be happening is maybe if you drink wine, that's one of my things.
Mhm.
Maybe you're reaching for a glass or two, even though you know that once you have it, you won't really feel better, but you do it anyway because it's a habit that you've built related to possibly grief or whatever else that might be
Mhm.
going on in your life.
Mhm.
And so when you find yourself doing something to feel better now, what you can kind of do is start asking yourself, well, how will I feel an hour from now? Right. And if the answer is I'm going to feel worse or I'm not going to feel any better, then I mean, the question or the answer really could be that could be one of my stirbs. This could be
Yeah.
something I'm using to hide from whatever emotional turmoil I'm avoiding.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that totally makes sense. So it really is about being present in the moment, like kind of trying to be present in your own life in those moments, and try and kind of catch yourself of like, oh, is it like, am I, it's kind of one of the questions I always ask, I always have people ask themselves is like, am I really hungry? Like, do I really need to be eating this? Or is this something that I'm using to avoid something, to avoid some other feeling, some other emotion, or some activity I don't want to do? So,
Absolutely.
so how does all of this, how does what you do, how does it relate to the stages of grief?
Okay, so actually, I really like this topic because one of the things that the authors had discovered whenever they were going through the process of creating the book and the institute
Mhm.
and everything, which really he was doing it to help his own grief, and
Mhm.
it just turned into what it is, right?
Mhm.
But what they discovered is there are no stages to grief. Like I
Mm.
said, every relationship is unique. Therefore, all grief is unique.
Mm.
So through the grief recovery method, we don't compare, we don't relate to each other, we don't relate to anybody else's grief in any other way. There's no length of time, no order of things to happen when somebody is grieving. Everyone grieves in their own way. So the idea that there's, a set of stages for everyone to go through is actually an outdated myth. And, in fact, there's actually quite a few myths that have been debunked through the Grief Recovery Handbook and through the Institute that if I may, I could talk about them for a minute right now.
Absolutely. Please go right
Yeah.
ahead.
So one big one for me, especially that I think everybody has heard, is time heals all wounds, and it doesn't. It doesn't. I suffered with my grief for 20 years before I finally found the action steps through the method to finally let it go. A couple of people I know who I worked with said that they had their grief for like 50 years and it just never, it never went away. They waited and they waited because time heals all wounds, but it's just, you know, they had this boulder that they've been carrying for like ever, and they finally were able to release it by going through the method. So one of the things we talk about is we have this analogy where we have like a backpack. Imagine being born and you have a backpack when you're born, and anytime you lose something or something bad happens, you put a little rock or a little pebble, and slowly that backpack gets a little bit heavier and heavier, right? But then eventually what might happen is something really devastating happens. For me, I lost my mother when I was very young, tragically. And so when something like that happens, imagine you get a big boulder shoved into that bag and it just
Right.
weighs you down, and it just takes away all your energy, it takes away your passion, it takes away a lot of your will, right? So this is kind of one of the things that we use to get the idea across and what it feels like to deal with grief. And it doesn't go away with time.
Right.
Another myth that is a big one too is replacing the loss. So you'll see this a lot with pets. Honey, we'll get you a new fish tomorrow, or we'll get a new dog tomorrow. And it even goes with the last example with the cookie. I mean, you're replacing the problem with a cookie.
Right.
So a lot of times people try to replace the loss. And as emotional eaters, that's exactly what we try to do, is replace our loss with food if we're grieving,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, you know, there's obviously a few others. We're taught to grieve alone. We're taught to be strong for others. We're taught to keep busy. And I find keeping busy mixed with time heals all wounds is incredibly dangerous because it leads to burnout, because you're waiting for that grief to just finally drop, and you're keeping busy, keeping busy, keeping busy, waiting for that grief to drop, and you just end up suffering burnout and just adding to the pile of problems that you already have on top of everything else.
Right. Right. Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's well, that, and that's so, um, it's so true. What you said, about people, grieving in private, and that it's supposed to be just something that you're supposed to deal with kind of on your own, or as you said, if you buy into the other ones, the time heals all wounds, well, then you start thinking, well, there must be something wrong with me because it's been 10 years and I'm still upset. And so I must be broken. There must be something wrong with me, when the reality is you just never dealt with the problem in the first place.
Yeah, and like I said, grief is the normal and natural reaction to loss.
Mhm.
Ev- It is 100% normal to grieve for years and years and years and just never feel like you're going to get over it. And that's a big thing that a lot of people tend to start believing, is that they're never going to get over it.
Mhm.
But that's not the truth. The truth
Mhm.
is, time doesn't heal wounds, but time plus correct action is what can heal the wound,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's what we need to do.
Yeah. Well, cool. That leads to, what does it look like? How does somebody recover?
Right. So like I said, recovering from loss is achieved by a series of small and correct choices made by the griever, and that's what we say. Time doesn't heal wounds. Time with correct action is going to make the difference. So right now, the way I work with people is I work through a one-on-one 7-week program. The idea is to move you beyond the pain of loss and isolation. And I make a point of saying that it's super important to understand that it's not a cure-all, right? But what it is it's a toolkit that you can use for any and all losses and any and all relationships for the rest of your life. We never forget someone or the circumstances to the end of something, but that doesn't mean we can't heal from it. And that's a big assumption that most people make. Like I said, we think that I'm never going to get over this, right? But through the process, we work together to complete relationships that we're grieving and haven't gotten over. um, I like to look at it as completing the emotional attachment, so we're releasing that emotional attachment through the process. And that's what we do through the 7 weeks. And a good analogy to look at it is like if you have a garden, right? And you got to keep cleaning your garden. You got to keep de-weeding the weeds, otherwise they grow and take over, right? And it's the same thing through the grief recovery method, and even through like weight loss or anything. You don't just do it once. You don't work out one day and then never have to work out again, or you don't
Right.
watch your food, what you're eating one day, and you can eat whatever you want for the rest of your life.
Right.
It's an ongoing process.
Hmm.
But once you go through it, once you go through it once, then you know how to do it over and over and over again for however many relationships or however many losses that you feel that you need to do it for.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
always start with the most important one. We always start with the biggest one, and the biggest one that's weighing you down. And that
Hmm.
is just like a huge, oh, it's like a huge relief
Right.
once you get through it that first time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's so true. And it's one of the things, I think that's probably my kind of my biggest thing with weight loss and just the fitness, kind of the fitness industry in general, and certain ways of doing things is there's certain, certain programs and certain things that make it like, and you do this and then you never have to think about it again. It's like, oh no, we have to think about it and we're constantly working on ourselves, and we're constantly always, especially, being an emotional eater or having any sort of, addiction issue or anything like that, where it's like it's the handbag that never leaves your shoulder, but the handbag doesn't have to weigh you down. I mean, it can be something that you work with, not against, and it can just, it does take that daily, or that commitment that, like, I'm going to keep working on this, I'm going to keep improving, because I think that's just what life's about. We always have to just keep growing and changing. And I love the fact that what I really like is the idea that you can learn these techniques and then take them and apply them to, you learn it for one piece, and then you can apply it to any of the other pieces that you need to be able to, to address, or as things come up, you can then use it, that it's like you say, it's like a little toolkit that you have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that is so cool. So what are some other ways that the things that the grief recovery, and what are some other relationships or other things that people might not think about that this could apply to?
Yeah. Yeah. So actually, like something you just mentioned, even people going through addictions, one thing that a lot of people don't consider to be an issue with grieving is when somebody who is trying to quit um, something and they're trying to get off of an addiction, and sometimes they go through a grieving process because, if it's we'll say it's alcohol in this
Mhm.
case. If you've had a serious relationship with alcohol for a long time and you finally decide you're going to quit and let it go, you might go through a bit of a grieving process because, I
Sure.
mean, you have a relationship with alcohol that you need to go through and release and feel through as well. Like I personally, so far I've completed 3 relationships myself personally. And it could be anything. Like I said, it could be death, divorce, loss of pets, loss of career. And it can be with relationships, if it's with somebody, with people, it could be with relationships with people who have passed on or who are still alive. And it can actually be super beneficial to actually do this work on people who are still alive, because, I mean, it can change the dynamic of the relationship that you currently have with them. So, for example, if you're struggling in your marriage to the point where you're considering divorce, it might be worth considering doing this work. I've known people who were suffering from adultery cases,
Mhm.
and they really wanted to try and make it work. And by going through this process, it really helped them take the
Sure.
steps forward to actually move on from that situation.
Mhm.
And like, I mean, even money, like people go through bankruptcy and have terrible relationship with money.
Mhm.
Your body, if you have a serious drop in health, or maybe you lost a limb or significantly gained a lot of weight or something, and you
Mhm.
have a bad relationship with your body, loss of trust, loss of safety, loss of control, like, I mean, it could be anything,
Mhm.
absolutely anything.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I would have never, I wouldn't have ever connected those things before. So that's really true, because there is grief in any of those types of situations. So that makes so much sense. I forgot to say, if anybody has a question for Kayla, if you want to drop a question in the comments, you are more than welcome to. I think this is just fascinating. So if anybody has any questions, I'm going to actually go back and scroll the questions and see. Oh yes, Gina, congratulations on leaving your new job. You're leaving your old job for your new job. That is awesome. Okay, I just want to make sure I don't miss any questions. Okay. So Kayla, what would, if someone wants to learn more about what you do and wants to reach out, reach out to you, what do they need to do? I've already actually, y'all, I just want to tell you first off that I put in the post for this live, I put the link to Kayla's group because Kayla has a Facebook group. So you definitely can jump in and jump over and join her Facebook group. But Kayla, what would if somebody who is interested in learning more about what you do, what would they need to do?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I can leave a comment. People can reach out to me personally. People can join my group and reach out to me through there. I don't bite. You can definitely reach out to me anytime. But I mean, if you're not too comfortable reaching out to me personally, then I mean, the first thing I would suggest to anybody is consider buying the book. Because I mean, if you decide you're going to go through the process, you're going to need it anyway. Like if I take on a client, the first thing I do is send them the book. So that's something you're going to need right off the hop anyway.
And that's called the
You can
Grief
also
Recovery
look up-
Handbook.
Yes, the Grief Recovery Handbook.
Okay.
Yeah, by John W. James. I'll have to double check the name again. I can put it in the chat here for anybody who wants to know
Okay.
the exact book. But then there's also, you can look up the Grief Recovery Institute. They have their own website. And you can even find specialists that live near you if you'd rather work with somebody in person. I do all my stuff online. That's how I do my stuff. So I prefer to do it that way because then people can stay in the comfort of their own home and everything like that too. But yeah, the initial, if you wanted to talk to me, you could book an initial consultation. The initial consultation is free. And through that time, I'll book half an hour to an hour. Usually half an hour is plenty of time, but it might take an hour. We could determine if this is the right plan of action for you to actually, like, you know, if this is the direction that you need and want to go, and if I'm the right person to help you go down that path. And right now, because it's a new thing that I'm adding to my business, I am offering a significant discount for the first, you know, so many clients. So, I mean, if anybody really wants to jump on this, now would be a good time to contact me for sure. If they want to, you know, save a little extra cash too, that sort of thing.
Okay. Oh, okay. I was looking at, I was on the other page and I was like, oh, wait, she's still talking, but it wasn't. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, thank you. I think I would like to, actually, I would like to take it back to the people in the group. Please go ahead and in the comments, if you wouldn't mind, if you I found what Kayla was talking about to be so fascinating. It's so interesting. So if this was helpful, if you feel like you have gotten you've gotten more information and kind of feel like you might have a direction to go in, you would just drop the word helpful in the comments, just so I can know, so Kayla can know that this was a helpful topic and that it was something that really was, you know, kind of gave you some direction as to me, because, you know, Kayla offered her own, you know, own free consultation, but also provided information about the book and about the Institute. So if that was helpful, please, please, please drop helpful in the comments, and that will let us know, let me know in particular, because I always want to be able to provide information that's going to be really valuable to everybody here in the group. I think that I think there's just so many different ways that we can address, so many different angles that we can address emotional eating from. And I learned a ton, and I'm going to get the book, and I'm super excited. I think this is just a really, really valuable service that you're offering that I think is so important, that I just don't think a lot of people, they know there's something there, but they just don't know what the steps are to take, that they need to, you know, what the steps are to start moving in a positive direction. So thank you so much for just for coming on and sharing everything that you're doing, and you know, sharing your own personal insights and the things that you've been able to do for yourself. I'm so happy for you. I just think this is awesome. It just makes me really thrilled, just, you know, having worked together before. I think this is just, it looks like this is the direction. This is your thing. This is like really exciting to me. I love this.
It feels really good, honestly, doing this work. I've
Yeah.
got to work with a couple of people since I started, and it just like I've been just amazed at the process. Like
Mhm.
I've been through it. I've had to go through it myself to get the certification, but then to lead
Right.
somebody else through it is just like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
that's so cool. That's so cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so honored that you took the time to come on and share with my community. And yeah, I'll drop a thank you, drop some love in the comments to Kayla, and definitely in the post, they'll have the link to her group. And so definitely, I know this is going to be a real focal point for her in her group. So you'll definitely want to want to jump over and be a part of her community and be able to see what she's doing and the things that she's offering over there, because I think it'll be really, really valuable for so many of you. So and again, if you want to know any more information, if you want to message me and you want me to do a 3-way chat introduction with Kayla, I'm absolutely happy to do that. If you're you want to do it but you're not sure how to do it, you don't feel comfortable, please feel free to just let me know, and I can start a little 3-way conversation between the three of us, and then let Kayla take it from there. Okay. All right. And everyone on the podcast, if you are in the show notes, we will have definitely contact information as to how to get in touch with Kayla, and all the resources that she talked about in the podcast. So again, thank you so much, Kayla. I really, really appreciate it. And yeah, just the best of luck to you. I'm so excited for you. I think this is going to be amazing.
thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Good. Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Such a special day. And we will see you all next week. So have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you next week on the podcast. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.